Tonight at 10, we bring you two major stories from the US and from here. Boris Johnson has, at least for now, called a halt to his political career. 4 years after becoming Prime Minister, he leaves Parliament over a Commons report into whether he misled MPs over lockdown parties in Number 10, and he issues a blistering condemnation of its findings. Boris Johnson was the driving force behind Brexit. In a bitterly worded statement, he claims the MPs are engaged in a witch hunt and want to take revenge for his role in the Leave campaign.
Boris Johnson is a regular deliverer of political asteroids. Tonight, another one crashes in. We'll examine what it means for Mr. Johnson and what it means for the Prime Minister.
And our other major story on tonight's programme. Classified documents on national defence and nuclear secrets, which US prosecutors say were stored in Donald Trump's Florida residence, as 37 criminal charges are unveiled against him.
It's election interference at the highest level. There's never been anything like what's happened. I'm an innocent man, I'm an innocent person.
And can they do it? Manchester City prepare to take on Inter Milan in tomorrow night's Champions League final, hoping to win the treble.
On BBC London, more on Boris Johnson's resignation. Plus, a pub says it may have to close after a bill for £100,000 over the lockdown period.
Good evening. In the first of two major breaking stories tonight, Boris Johnson has chosen to abruptly curtail his political career, announcing he's to stand down as an MP with immediate effect after receiving the Commons report into whether he misled Parliament over lockdown parties, which he has lambasted as the work of a kangaroo court, claiming there's a witch hunt against him. The shock news of his resignation came hot on the heels of the publication of his resignation honours list, with rewards for key allies in the Conservative Party and for a number of senior officials who are implicated in the Partygate scandal. Well, we'll have more on the day's events in just a moment, but first I'm joined by our political editor, Chris Mason, and a bombshell tonight, Chris.
It is, yeah. Boris Johnson doesn't do whispers, Boris Johnson doesn't do subtle, Boris Johnson doesn't do black and white or beige. He does maximum decibel, absolutely direct, hugely colourful interventions. And tonight is one of those. He takes pot shots at Parliament, he takes pot shots at some of his fellow Conservative MPs, and, crucially, he takes pot shots at the Prime Minister. But don't for a minute tonight think that this is the end of Boris Johnson, not a bit of it. What it's been yet again is another day where Boris Johnson does what he does best, which is making headlines. Here's my colleague, Ione Wells.
His own conduct made him resign as Prime Minister. It's his own conduct making him now resign as an MP.
Of the Parliamentary Conservative
Boris Johnson was being investigated by Parliament's Privileges Committee into whether he misled MPs about COVID lockdown parties in Downing Street. He faced a possible suspension and even by-election if they found him guilty. In a bombshell statement tonight, he wrote, "I have received a letter from the Privileges Committee making it clear, much to my amazement, that they are determined to use the proceedings against me to drive me out of Parliament." He continues to maintain his innocence, saying, "I did not lie, and I believe that in their hearts the committee knows it." But he adds he will stand down as an MP immediately and trigger a by-election in his seat, saying, "It is very sad to be leaving Parliament, at least for now."
I don't know about all this soap opera. What I do know about is that the people are completely fed up about this roller coaster of chaos and incompetence that they've been witnessing. They will get a chance in the near future to be able to express themselves, and I'm quite sure that they will be showing just how disgusted they are with all of this.
His resignation, a final punishment after a series of scandals. Hours after releasing his resignation honours list, a final reward for many of those implicated. Loyal defenders like his former ministers Priti Patel and Jacob Rees-Mogg. His spokesmen past and present, Jack Doyle, who resigned amid Partygate fallout, Git O'Harry, who resigned with Boris Johnson, his current spokesman Ross Kempsell. Some close aides, Martin Reynolds, who resigned after inviting a host of people to drinks in the Downing Street garden during COVID, David Canzini, who he appointed to restore his battered reputation. All of the 38 people to receive honours and 7 people to receive peerages are connected to Boris Johnson. A notable absence, though, for one of his closest allies, Nadine Dorries. The former Culture Secretary said she had been on the list but believed her name was sent back to the committee that vets appointments. She also resigned tonight, triggering another by-election.
And I think one of the reasons why I've hung on was because I did think to myself, wouldn't that just be amazing? Because what it says to everybody from my background is you could do that too. You could be a peer in the House of Lords. But I don't think it was to be.
Boris Johnson was a Prime Minister forced out by his own MPs over his standards in public life. He was being investigated into whether he misled Parliament. None of these things stopped him rewarding his friends, allies, cheerleaders and apologists in one big, but I hesitate to say final, scandal.
While it's Boris Johnson's leadership that is firmly under the spotlight tonight, today's events pose a tricky test for Rishi Sunak too, with 2 difficult by-elections now coming down the road. Ione Wells, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, Boris Johnson has been at the forefront of British politics for 2 decades. Our political correspondent Ben Wright takes a look now at his time as Prime Minister and his exit, for now at least, as an MP.
Boris Johnson's run out of road, for the time being at least. Faced with the findings of a report into whether he deliberately misled Parliament over the Partygate scandal, Mr Johnson has quit Parliament, sensationally, unexpectedly, angrily. In a letter, he claims to be the victim of a political hit job. Instead of waiting for the report to be published, he jumped, ending, for now, the political career of a man whose brief but chaotic premiership reshaped the country. He became Prime Minister in 2019 after Theresa May was toppled.
We did it! We did it! We pulled it off, didn't we?
That December, he gambled on a general election, winning the Tories their biggest majority for 30 years. The man who had led the Brexit campaign now had the votes in Parliament to leave the EU. Brexit was deeply divisive and changed the course of the country. Its legacy will be felt and disputed for years. And then came this, the first pandemic for a century.
I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
COVID dominated his premiership. Lockdowns, a vaccine, but many lives lost. An inquiry is about to start, examining what the government got right and wrong.
Have you lied to the public, Prime Minister?
Clearly wrong was the lockdown-breaking culture in Downing Street during COVID. The Partygate scandal engulfed Boris Johnson. There were allegations, denials, a police investigation and fines, including one for the Prime Minister himself.
I take full responsibility for everything that took place on my watch.
His integrity was under question, his authority damaged.
I can announce that the Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
Number 10's handling of a sexual harassment allegation involving a Tory MP a month later was the final straw. Ministers resigned en masse. Enough was enough. Mr Johnson felt he was turfed out unfairly, but Rishi Sunak has tried to draw a line under the chaotic premiership of his 2 predecessors. Mr Johnson's move has now plunged the party back into turmoil and will mean a by-election in his Uxbridge seat. A Prime Minister in tumultuous times, Mr Johnson hasn't lost his knack to shock. Ben Wright, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's speak again to Chris Mason. Ben alluded to it there, but what does this mean for the Conservatives and for Rishi Sunak?
It's deeply awkward for Rishi Sunak, because as Ben reflected there, what he has attempted to do since he became Prime Minister back in October is define himself pretty much as being everything that Boris Johnson was not. When you speak to him and those around him, that desire to bring a kind of seriousness of purpose back to government, which plenty of critics of Boris Johnson would say was not the kind of hallmark of his time governing. And yet what we see tonight, and we've seen before and we will see again, is that the ghost of Boris Johnson continues to haunt Rishi Sunak and continues to haunt the Conservative Party. And what's really striking, speaking to dozens and dozens of Conservatives tonight on the phone and zapping WhatsApps back and forth, is that Boris Johnson inspires adoration in some, irritation in others, or to put it bluntly, love from some and hate from others. In other words, he can divide the Conservative Parliamentary Party very effectively. We're seeing that playing out tonight. And the consequence in the short term is that we know there are going to be at least 2 parliamentary by-elections. So in Boris Johnson's seat in West London, that is a marginal seat that Labour have been pretty keen on trying to take. Mid-Bedfordshire, Nadine Dorris's seat, traditionally solidly Conservative. The Liberal Democrats quite excited about that one as well. Labour not entirely out of the picture either. So that is huge drama, massive distraction for Rishi Sunak. I should say there's been 1,000,001 rumours flying around tonight. We're not in the business of broadcasting rumours, but checking them out and working out what is true and what is not. Speaking to other senior Conservatives, not least Priti Patel, Dame Priti Patel as she now is, Simon Clarke, now Sir Simon Clarke, 2 former cabinet ministers under Boris Johnson, they are saying they are not resigning and following suit. But that gives you some sense, the very fact that that rumour was doing the rounds, of how high octane and how jittery the mood once again is within our governing party.
Don't go very far away, Chris. We'll talk to you again at the end of the programme on this very big night in Westminster. And if you want to keep following this developing story, there is more news and analysis from our political correspondents. Do just go to the BBC News website and the app. And in our other major story tonight, federal prosecutors in the US have revealed the full list of criminal charges against Donald Trump, who's become the first ever former president to face federal criminal prosecution. Mr. Trump is accused of retaining top secret documents when he left the White House 2 years ago and of conspiring to obstruct justice. Prosecutors say the documents contain details of the defense and weapons capabilities of the United States and other countries, including details of US nuclear programs, along with information on the potential vulnerability of the US and its allies to military attack. Mr. Trump is accused of taking dozens of boxes of documents from the White House to his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida and storing them in a ballroom, a bathroom and even a shower. Mr. Trump, who's due to appear in court on Tuesday, insists he's innocent. Here's our North America editor, Sarah Smith.
Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's private club and residence in Florida, where he is alleged to have kept classified and top secret documents which could endanger the national security of the United States. The indictment against Mr. Trump includes photographs of sensitive material being stored on stage in a ballroom where public events were held. Other boxes were kept in a bathroom. You can see them stacked up by the shower. The documents were all removed from the White House when Donald Trump left office, and they included secrets about America's nuclear weapons, about the military capabilities of the US as well as other countries, and of plans about how to retaliate in the face of a foreign attack. It was in Mar-a-Lago Donald Trump announced he's running for president again. It's also where he's accused of trying to obstruct justice. Told to search for documents that had to be returned, he suggested to his lawyers, "Wouldn't it be better if we told them we don't have anything here? And, well, look, isn't it better if there are no documents?" An independent special counsel is running this highly sensitive case.
We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone. Applying those laws, collecting facts, that's what determines the outcome of an investigation. Nothing more and nothing less.
He's emphasising the national security risk. Donald Trump used to agree.
In my administration, I'm going to enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. No one will be above the law.
The FBI found hundreds of classified papers in Mar-a-Lago, and prosecutors say on 2 occasions Donald Trump showed secret material to outsiders, including military plans, even saying he shouldn't be sharing it. President Biden's trying to keep out of it, saying he has nothing to do with this investigation.
President Biden, have you spoken to Attorney General Merrick Garland yet?
I have not spoken to him at all. I'm not going to speak to him. I have no comment on what happened.
So, like a pack of rabid wolves, they attack.
Donald Trump already has campaign ads claiming he's a political target. He thinks this will be a vote winner for him. After appearing in court in New York in April, charged with making illegal hush money payments, he raised $12 million and his poll ratings increased. Pictures from Donald Trump's Bedminster Golf Resort in New Jersey today appear to show him playing around. He's said to be in a defiant mood, planning to go ahead with campaign appearances tomorrow, which aides say are likely to be spicy. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Washington.
Well, Donald Trump is due to appear in court in Florida next Tuesday, not far from his Mar-a-Lago resort where the documents were seized by the FBI. Our correspondent Nomia Iqbal is outside the courthouse in Miami for us now. Nomia.
Prosecutors want Donald Trump to face a jury here in Florida where the alleged crimes took place. This is a Republican-leaning state. Remember, Donald Trump won it in the last two presidential elections. Here's how some voters reacted to the indictment.
I think it's very terrible, and it's a witch hunt against that man. It's been going on for 6 years.
He's been accused of keeping nuclear secrets. That's a massive breach of security. It could be used by an enemy. Does that not worry you?
That's a little worrisome, yes.
That's something that he has been accused of.
That's true, but I don't know if that's what they found there.
Well, it wasn't a surprise, but I mean, the law should apply to everybody. So if a grand jury found enough evidence, then yeah, he should be indicted. If it was a regular person, right, they would have been indicted probably a long time ago.
Previous Democrat presidential candidates have done far worse, I think, that has been reported than Donald Trump did, and they have basically gotten off scot-free. So all I'm saying is if he's guilty, he's guilty. But there are other guilty people out there, and if you're going to go after one, right, you have to punish the people who have done the injustices.
And so next Tuesday, the former president will appear in the courthouse behind me to face these federal charges. And once again, Rita, he continues to change the political landscape here in America.
Nomia, many thanks. Let's go back now to Sarah Smith, our North America editor, who's in Washington for us. And Sarah, what are the political and legal implications of this prosecution?
Well, they're enormous and they're deeply intertwined. So let's start with the politics of it all. Donald Trump is going to use this indictment to put rocket boosters under his campaign for the presidency. Now, that might sound a bit odd, but he is going to say that he is the victim of a witch hunt and a conspiracy by what he calls the deep state, the president and the FBI and the Department of Justice working together to prevent him returning to the White House. And the thing is, there is an audience in America for that narrative. He is going to craft this story and use it to solidify his base and his supporters, and at the same time make it really difficult for his rivals in the Republican Party to attack him. Already today we have heard most of them making sympathetic and supportive statements about Donald Trump. They daren't attack him over this because they know how sympathetic many Republicans in their party are towards what they see as Donald Trump's plight. Now, in the meantime, the legal machinations will carry on, saying that they have got nothing to do with politics. There's a special independent counsel in charge of this investigation to make sure it's got no connections to the president whatsoever. And they say they will pursue it as though it was any other case. But it's not any other case. When Donald Trump appears in court on Tuesday, he's going to appear in front of a judge who he personally appointed to the bench. That's not normal, and it is pretty messy already. And then a trial. Can one happen before the presidential election? Is it going to be kicked to after the presidential election next year? Nobody knows, but it's definitely messy.
Sarah, many thanks. 4 days after a dam was destroyed in southeastern Ukraine, at least a dozen people are known to have died, and hundreds of people trapped in their homes have posted pleas for help on social media, asking to be rescued from the rising water. Our Ukraine correspondent James Waterhouse is in the city of Kherson in the affected region, from where he sent this report.
A journey to safety and away from occupation. It's a voyage Marina and Valentina never thought they'd have to make.
I feel a sense of joy that we're alive, that we were brought here.
It has been very difficult. There was no power, no reception. It was as if we were on an uninhabited island. Our cats drowned, our dogs drowned, our chickens drowned.
Their friend Victor made the same journey, days after his wife was killed by shelling. He had to collect her death certificate from the officials Moscow installed.
It's good they rescued us, but I don't care about anything anymore. I don't want to go on living. Where do I go from here? I hope to give her a gravestone a year after her death. I buried her next to my mother, and I told her to wait for me.
In online posts, hundreds of people have begged to be rescued from the Eastern Bank. We try several numbers, with no luck. Some of the trapped say they're running low on water and food. There's a wariness for those who make it out. Despite warnings from the military to stay away, there are still volunteers here carrying out the endless rescue effort. 3 days on, the water is browner, but people are still being found. But the army are less keen on us being here because the usual to and fro of artillery has got louder. It's got closer. We meet international medics here with the army's blessing. Dominic, from the UK, explained the ongoing risks.
It's the dehydration aspect, it's the infection risk, because with that you've got rising water, but then you've also got massive obstacles underneath the water.
Kyiv has criticised the speed of international help since the Kakhovka Dam was destroyed. It is arriving. The need for it isn't going anywhere. James Waterhouse, BBC News, Kherson.
Well, as Russia continues its war in Ukraine, President Putin is waging another war at home on dissent. Since the invasion, thousands of Russians have been prosecuted under new laws designed to stifle criticism of the country's war effort. Now, one of Russia's most prominent human rights campaigners has gone on trial for his criticism of the war. Oleg Orlov, who's 70, faces up to 3 years in jail for allegedly discrediting the Russian army. Our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg was at the trial in Moscow.
Arriving for his trial, one of Russia's most respected human rights campaigners. Oleg Orlov stands accused of repeatedly discrediting the Russian army through his public criticism of the war in Ukraine. He faces up to 3 years in prison. Ahead of the trial, he told me how concerned he is by the wave of repression sweeping Russia.
By the level of cruelty, by the length of prison terms being handed out, this is reminiscent of Stalin's time. Civil society has been pushed underground, partially. What I fear is that it may now be completely destroyed.
More examples. Theatre director Zhenya Berkovich wrote anti-war poems. She's been charged with justifying terrorism in one of her plays. That could mean 7 years in prison. And for anti-war online posts, Olga Smirnova is accused of spreading fake news about the Russian army. She faces a decade in jail.
On paper, the Russian constitution guarantees freedom of conscience and freedom of speech. In reality, Russians who publicly criticize those in power are taking a considerable risk. The authorities here have built up quite a hefty toolbox of repressive laws, which are used to punish those who criticize the government and the war in Ukraine.
But they are not forgotten. Once a month, Muscovites come here to write letters and postcards to political prisoners. The event is organised by one of Russia's last remaining liberal parties. In a country where collective protest is restricted, there's still pen and paper to show solidarity and support. Just a few words, but they can mean so much to those behind bars.
You might start thinking that you are alone, you might fall into depression, and when they read our cards, our letters, I hope that makes them feel better.
The music matches the mood, the anxiety as repression grows. But writing these is one way of showing they won't be silenced. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Now, in less than 24 hours' time, Manchester City will begin their bid to win the treble when they take on Inter Milan in the Champions League final in Istanbul. They've already won the Premier League and the FA Cup. Manchester United are the only English team to have won all three competitions in the same season. Here's our sports editor, Dan Rowan.
Manchester City, double winners, now one more.
Even for a club now so used to success, Manchester City have reached new heights of domination. And now, here in Istanbul, they have the chance to finally conquer Europe and secure a first treble for a generation. Tonight, a final training session. The manager confident preparations were complete.
We are ready. I had the feeling that we are ready. The players will give absolutely everything, knowing and respecting a lot the opponents that we have ahead of us. Could not be otherwise, and yeah, go for it.
For all its wealth and talent, the Champions League has so far eluded the world's richest club, losing in the final against Chelsea 2 years ago. But having reached here by sweeping aside serial winners and holders Real Madrid, City are firm favourites.
This club has been hunting down this trophy for a number of years now. The owners have backed this club massively to obviously go and win this. Now we need, as a group of players, it falls on our shoulders.
City's Abu Dhabi owners have spent more than £1 billion since 2008, bringing great success but also controversy. The club currently fighting a catalogue of Premier League charges for alleged financial rule breaches.
Here in a city that straddles two continents, the sense is that European club football finds itself at a crossroads. Having already secured domestic supremacy, victory for Manchester City would fully establish them among the game's elite and raise questions over who can challenge them.
If Manchester City was to essentially stroll through the final, I think the alarm bells would be ringing incredibly loudly. UEFA would be concerned about this because it would mark the first victory for City, but potentially the success of state-backed football clubs.
Opponents Inter Milan, seen as surprise finalists, trained here this evening. The three-time winners, all that stand between City and the treble. The last English team to achieve that, arch-rivals Manchester United in 1999. That year, Mikel Silvestre went from Inter to Old Trafford. He described the scale of the feat City are on the verge of emulating.
It's extremely difficult. When I joined United after the treble, I felt that team was unstoppable, and that's pretty much the sense that we have when we watch Manchester City this season.
With some of the world's best players and perhaps the game's greatest manager, City are already one of English football's finest ever teams. One more win and the title they've coveted for so long will finally be theirs too. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Istanbul.
Back now to our top story. Boris Johnson's announcement that he's standing down as an MP with immediate effect after receiving the Partygate report. Let's get some final thoughts from our political editor, Chris Mason. Chris, sum up where we are tonight.
An extraordinary night on this side of the Atlantic and on the other. And what's striking tonight, Rita, is some senior Conservatives are drawing a parallel between Boris Johnson and Donald Trump. Two huge characters, vast charisma, even greater controversy, shaking up their parties, as I said earlier, loved by some, detested by others, even within their own party, never far from the headlines and always leaving people guessing about what is coming next. One senior Conservative figure describing Boris Johnson to me tonight as a medieval king rewarding his gang, another saying he has taken unedifying behaviour to a new level. Others, though, say within the Conservative Party he's the best Tory Prime Minister since Margaret Thatcher. So you get a sense of that contrast. The soap opera of the Conservative Party has shaped our politics now for several years. And over the last few months, we've arguably had some rather dull episodes. Some people might have rather liked that, given what came before, others perhaps not. We are now back in the territory of cliffhangers. So what happens next? That's the point. We don't know, and neither does Downing Street.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. Chris Mason there, our political editor. Right, time for a look at the weather now. Here's Thomas Schaffenacker. Thomas.
Rita, thank you. Hot, hot, hot. Temperatures have already reached
30 degrees Celsius, or earlier on in northern parts of Wales, and some towns and cities across other parts of the country will also hit 30 degrees tomorrow. And the heat is coming in from the southern climes, not just hot air, but also increasing humidity. Let's have a look at the morning on Saturday. 15 degrees in Plymouth, about that in London, but fresher around Aberdeenshire and the northeast of England. And here, perhaps a little bit of cloud in the morning, but otherwise it's a sunny start. Scattered showers, I think, across the southwest, but the real showers will get going later on in the morning and into the afternoon across parts of the Midlands, into Wales. A large area could experience showers, but the showers are confined. Very small areas of downpours, gusty winds at times as well. So many of us will miss the showers altogether. It is going to be essentially a hot and sunny day for many of us inland, with temperatures in the mid to high 20s, possibly 30 degrees in a few spots, and I think more comfortable around coastal areas. And I'm pleased to say it's going to be a lot better on the North Sea coast, around 22 degrees Celsius after the recent cooler days. I think on Sunday, a greater chance of catching showers across some western areas, and these showers really will be slow moving, frequent lightning, gusty winds, and again, some hail at times as well. But it won't last for very long, because this will quickly turn back to sunshine. So a bit of a mixed bag for some of us over the course of the weekend. But overall, it is a hot one. Again, 30 in London, around about 22 degrees there in Newcastle on Sunday. How long is this warm weather going to last? Well into the week ahead. We can see those temperatures hovering about above average, with 1 or 2 showers still lingering into Monday. So summer is well and truly here. Back to you.
Good news. Thank you very much, Thomas. And that is tonight's BBC News at 10. You can, of course, keep up to date with all the latest developments on the BBC website. From the 6 o'clock team, it is goodbye. Newsnight is on with Faisal Islam. There he is, just getting underway on BBC Two. But the news continues here on BBC One, as now it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Good night.